to be educated, but I'm so frustrated. Hello to my loneliness. I guess that ignorance is bliss.
Welcome to Parkstone at Home, a podcast where we talk property, home and living in Queensland, Australia. If you own property or are interested in investing, or if you're like me and are currently renting, then this is a podcast for you. As always, I'm Hayley, Marketing Director, and I'm joined by Elizabeth Jackson, owner of Parkstone Property and local Mackay entrepreneur.
I wish I knew.
This episode, we will be discussing what happens when a managing agent changes. All right, welcome back to Parkstone at Home. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. And you?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad.
Fabulous.
Ready to grab some lunch after this, I reckon. So as always, we'll jump in with a motivational quote or something inspiring from recently. I think you went first last time, so I'll go first this time. Got a pretty simple one, and it's, I guess, about productivity. So you don't have to be extreme, just consistent. That's something I really like. As someone who likes to jump into extremes all the time, and it's all or nothing.
Yeah.
No, you just have to do little bits every day. I don't know if you've read Atomic Habits.
No.
Great book. The psychology of habits and stuff. Pretty much that, but in a whole book. Consistent little things is what leads to your big results.
Okay, so little things like what? Getting up, making your bed.
Yeah, or just like breaking down tasks into those little bite-sized pieces, you know, and like you might not feel like you're really making much progress that day, but because you've did it every day.
Yeah, it's just chipping away at something, isn't it?
Over time.
Little bit by little bit. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, so that's
I like
mine.
that. Mine is enjoy being while becoming.
Oh, I love that.
So whilst, it's something I've learnt in opening up Parkstone Property, there are ups and downs with that. And often too, having your own business can be quite lonely because you're making all the decisions, the buck stops with you. I'm really lucky that I've got really good people around me, a great business partner that I ring randomly when there's the highs, and then when I lost a property, I rang and we had a chat about it all. And it's sitting in those, in the good and the bad, to being able to then reflect and go, okay, yeah, that sucked, but from that bottoming out, I suppose, in some ways, to then there's a rise from there.
We'll move on to word on the street. So I've got only one for you today.
Okay.
And that is rent increases. Tell us a little bit about that.
So we had a change in legislation that rent can only be increased once every 12 months.
Right.
And that is dependent on the property or relates to the property. So you can have a change of 6 tenants in a 12-month period. The rent has to stay the same. So it's now part of the General Tenancy Agreement, or GTA. We have to list when the last rent increase was.
Okay.
The same with the RTA. When we increase a bond or lodge a bond, we have to note it in there. It's also on the management authority as well with our owners when the last rent increase was. So rent increases come into play when it's a lease renewal time or a time when there's a change of tenant, but it's got to be on or after that 12-month anniversary.
Right.
With the property.
Okay.
So you can't change it every time you change a tenant, unfortunately.
Yeah, but you used to be able to.
It used to be like that, but because some owners had been increasing the rent every time, and they weren't maybe $10 or $15, they were considerable amounts. We are noticing a lot of rent increases now with properties that are advertised in relation to, say, a break lease.
Yeah.
It might be, okay, rent advertised now is, say, $510, but when the lease is up for renewal or a change of like that 12-month anniversary, it's going to going up to $700 a week or something like that, which is notifying and advertising that there is an increase, but it's such a massive increase as well, because that property may have been below market value or well below market value 12 months ago, and now the owner's playing catch up to try and tap into this great market that we're having for our owners with higher rents, which is not great for tenants, because looking at an ad, you think, oh, yeah, it's $510 a week. Awesome. That's right in our price bracket. That's great. But in it might be 6 months' time, it's going to be increasing by, I don't know, $150, $200 or something, which is really not affordable for most.
So is it true that there's a cap of 10% when it comes to rental increases?
Not that I know of.
Oh, okay.
I don't believe there's anything in legislation. I could be wrong, unless something's changed in the last couple of weeks, but I believe it's whatever figure. I mean, the other thing is, like I've mentioned before in podcasts, if you get a rent increase, you can counter offer.
Yeah.
If it's something that's more if it's beyond your financial capability to pay, always ask, because what's the worst they're going to say is no. And then you've got to reevaluate, okay, if they say no to my counter offer, what do I do? Am I looking at moving, or do I pay the rent increase and make a sacrifice somewhere? There is the other alternative of going to QCAT for what you feel is an unreasonable rent increase. But to be honest with you, it might take you 2 to 3 months to even be heard in front of a QCAT magistrate or adjudicator, and sometimes that's well beyond the period of time that you have to give for a rent increase anyway.
Yeah, right.
So sometimes it is unfortunately one of these areas that can be a little bit tricky to navigate as a tenant, because you are it's one of the risks of renting. That, they increase. Instead of it being like every 6 months, which when leases were usually renewed for, people are now renewing every 12 months, which is great for longevity and guaranteed rent, and because to fall in line with the legislation change. So unfortunately, rent increases are part and parcel. There is a level of unwritten responsibility, I suppose, for an owner and a property manager with a tenant, especially with the circumstance that I mentioned before of, the property was well below market value, probably a great tenant and a great owner, but they've actually it's a negative now for the tenant, because they're so out of touch with what the rental market is that when they suddenly get a rent increase of $150, I mean, that's excessive in my eyes. But that's just my opinion though. But then that tenant now is like, oh my goodness, if I want to move, I'm going to be paying that anywhere.
Yeah.
So what do they do? They're really in a really hard situation of trickiness of, if they can't afford any more than what they're paying now, then they're going to be back in with all the other people that are struggling as well, and then the owner can advertise the property at a much higher rent, unfortunately. So it's unfortunately one of the risks with renting, is you don't necessarily have any control over that whatsoever, which is tough. But it's definitely going back and asking for that, or giving that counter offer, because if they say yes, awesome. It's a win for you.
Yep. Great. Thank you for that. So let's go into what this episode is all about, which is about changing your managing agent, which is, I suppose, to translate, is if you're under Harcourts right now, the owner of your property that you live in might decide to go to LJ Hooker or Parkstone property to have somebody else manage their property.
Correct.
Essentially.
Yeah.
So I guess I wanted to ask you, like, what might be the reason why an owner might do that? Does it happen often? And what does that mean for you as the tenant?
I would say it can happen often. If property management is a very high turnover in staff, unfortunately, because property managers, like I've said before in podcasts, we're the meat and the sandwich. So we convey, or we communicate with both parties, and sometimes that can take a massive toll on people, and they get burnt out, or they have stress issues, or they just want to have babies and they leave the industry and they never come back to it. It is juggling a lot of balls in the air, but when a good property manager goes, sometimes that leaves a opening or a gap, and if somebody else who feels it steps into that role cannot step in and do the same level as that previous property manager, sometimes that's enough for an owner to go, you know what, I don't like this anymore. I want to move to a different agency. Not all real estate agencies have got rent rolls. There are some agencies that just concentrate on sales. Most agencies do, because the rent roll, which is the properties that are managed. That is the only saleable asset of a real estate office. And sales, they come and go. They're short-term transactions. Property management is long-term transactions. So if an owner has a change, or they may have been referred to another property manager because they hadn't experienced great service, or something happened and it cost them a lot more money than what they anticipated, or they just can't get hold of their property manager, or there's been massive changes at that agency, or that agency's been bought, that rent roll has then gone to another agency.
Right.
You don't have to stay there. Yes, you've signed a management agreement with that agency, but you can terminate that agency agreement. It's generally 30 days, depending on the circumstances. So if it's really bad service, you might be able to argue, I want to leave now because I'm paying you management fees, but I'm not actually getting it very good service by my standards. So I want to go effective immediately. So that's some of the reasons why an owner might want to change.
Right.
And it's relatively an easy process to do.
Right. Okay. And so if that does happen, if you're a tenant in a property that they own, what does that mean for you? Does anything change noticeably?
It does.
Okay.
In terms of where a tenant pays rent, obviously that has to change. So the tenant no longer is paying into the old agency's trust account. It will have to go into a new trust account.
Right.
You'll obviously then be communicating with the new agency, but there is a handover day or a changeover day when that becomes the day of like D-Day, I suppose. So that's the last day that you talk to the old agency, and it's the first day that you start talking to the new agency.
Right.
And that is predetermined by when the management authority was signed and when the termination notice has been sent by the owner or new agency to the existing old agency.
Right.
Generally, it's that 30-day period.
Okay.
So, a lot can change, but I suppose the main important one is making sure that the rent is going to the new agency after that changeover day. Otherwise, it becomes overpaid rent with the old agency, and it can become very, very murky waters if that agency doesn't do the right thing and holds on to that money or doesn't respond to your emails. You have to chase them, and that's a pain. Because it's not necessarily a change that you've instigated or wanted, but it's the owner's property, so the owner has the right to change their managing agent whenever they want.
Yeah. Fair enough. And is there certain types of like documentation that the tenant might receive when this type of thing happens? Or?
So in a perfect world, the new agency will contact the current tenant. The current agency, who's losing the management, will contact the tenant and let them know, hey, we've received termination from your owner. This is the new managing agent. They will be in touch with you to let you know the process from here.
Right.
The new agency emails the tenant, which the information the owner could give, or sometimes the current agent will send that in goodwill, like to keep good relations between property managers. I mean, no, there's it seems like no property manager wants to be friends with another one, but like at the end of the day, we're all in the same boat. We're all doing the same thing. Exactly. So we get the information either from the owner sending us the lease agreement or the general tenancy agreement. We can get tenants' contact details from that. Right. And it just allows us to then help make this process really, really smooth. So then the tenant knows what's going on, because more often than not, the current agency doesn't let the tenant know. And then the tenant suddenly gets an email 2 days before a changeover of, hey, we're the new managing agent.
Yep.
And the tenant's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Is this a scam?
True.
So it's really helpful if the current agent, whilst I know it's hard when you lose a management, but at the same time the owner's made a choice. There's obviously an area for improvement with your services if you lose something, or it may be something completely out of your control. But you're just going to have to cop it on the chin and go, okay, there's a procedure here. We need to make sure that the tenant is looked after. Yeah. Because the owner's already made their choice. So from this now, the tenant, we can help make sure that transition period is really simple. So on the changeover day, once those emails have been sent to the tenant, hopefully the tenant's all on board and understands everything. On the changeover day, the new agency will collect the keys from the current or old agency, and then all of the documentation associated with that tenancy. So any outstanding maintenance orders, the general tenancy agreement, a copy of the tenant's payment ledger to show every single transaction that whilst they've been at that property. It also shows their current pay to date, which we need to upload into our new system for the new management, so that everything continues the same as before, the applications that you originally applied for the property with. So then we can see photos of animals, so we know when we go to the property, if there's 2 dogs and then there's 3, it's like, oh, that's a new dog. Yep. The last routine inspection and any other documents that are associated with that property and that tenant get sent over to the new agency.
Right.
That's, how it works in a perfect world, but sometimes things
Doesn't
come
always
up.
go that way.
Don't always go that way. But I like to text a tenant or have a chat to them closer to when the handover is, and also text them the trust account details, because I don't trust emailed details with financial things like that, because cyber security and things like that. And then, the tenant just, from there, it should just flow through, that they just continue paying rent as normal into the trust account. Sometimes there can be a bit of a mix-up with paid to dates, because some agencies like to pay rent up to the day that it hands over, which really mucks everything up. Legislation actually allows the current agency to receipt rent right up to the day of handover. Okay. And even if it means it's paid in advance, so let's say they pay rent or handover days on the 2nd of December, they can receipt rent on the 1st of December for that tenant, and it might pay them from the 1st of December to the 8th, the 1st to the 6th of December, but that's still okay because you still manage that property. The owner will still pay management fees, whether it's with the current agent or the new agent. It means then the tenant is still in their same payment cycle, rather than, oh no, you only have to pay us 1 day's rent because it's handing over tomorrow. That is then going to hand over to a new agency with a part payment of 1 day's rent, and then their paid to date changes.
Yes.
It's then always going to be due on the 2nd, whether that could be a Wednesday or whatever date. Yeah. It changes everything and it mucks everything up. And then those poor tenants have I don't like a messy ledger. I like everything to be no part payments, no credits, that kind of thing. Yep. But then it changes everything for them, and it's not from their fault at all. Yeah. So if I lose a management, I like to make sure, okay, this is the handover date, but if the rent is received before that, I'll receipt it and then hand over a ledger to say this is where the tenant's paid to. And so then the tenant has that smooth, nothing really changes apart from where that money goes. Yeah. It saves so much confusion.
So theoretically, if you're ahead, you should be able to stay ahead. Yeah. As long as things are done properly. Yeah. I assume though, based on pretty much what you've said, that there isn't any minimum notice period for tenants about this type of change?
Not really,
not legislatively?
No. No, you could ring them up the day before and say, hey, you're changing agents and this is who's going to be it. Or sometimes some tenants don't even get told by their current agency, and then they find out from the new agency.
So that doesn't feel good, does it? No. Probably not best practice.
No, not best practice. And I get that property managers are always under the pump, but when you get a termination notice, that kind of stings a little bit when you get them, because it's like, oh man, what did I do? 9 times out of 10 you know what's happened. But you get that notification and then there usually is a process in the office of, okay, ring the owner, find out why they're leaving, even though you probably know, but it's acknowledging that you've received it. Because once it's sent, like with any email, once it's sent and it's done, it's sent. So that 30 days starts that day that it's sent. Yeah. But, not all property managers are created equal, unfortunately. So, but it is unfortunate for the tenants that get that notification a couple of days before it happens. They're just a bit in shock. So there's not the level of communication being extended, unfortunately. Right. Which, in some ways, is a reason why those owners are leaving.
True. That makes sense. Well, was there anything else that you wanted to share about changing property managers and what that means for either party?
I think for owners, property managers are not just rent receipters. So it's very important that you have a good relationship with your property manager, and because then that helps flow through to the tenant. If you've got good service, a tenant will stay longer in a house, whereas and less changeover of tenants, less wear and tear on your property if you have just one long-term tenant. it's hard to know whether you're getting good service where you are. Sometimes some owners just want to set and forget, and they only hear from their property manager when there's a problem with the property.
Yeah.
And each to their own. But I mean, owners that have come across to me from other agencies, they've unfortunately experienced bad service, and there's been a lot of things I've had to fix up for them because there's been lack of experience with the property manager, and they've just been left to their own devices sometimes. Whereas it is sometimes hard to compete with 2 decades of experience, but you've got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we're talking about your biggest asset.
Yeah.
It's an investment property. It could be anywhere from $400,000 to $1 million.
Yeah.
You don't want just anybody managing it.
That's right.
So you need somebody who's on the ball and is checking their arrears and is on top of all the paperwork and whatnot.
Understands sort of the legislation.
Yeah, definitely understanding the legislation and the changes that are upcoming, because now with the change of government just recently, we don't know if those changes are going to come in 30 May next year. They might fall by the wayside. But it's just having somebody that's on top of that for you is really important. And sometimes you do have to pay a little bit more in your management fees to have that experience. But once you've experienced that experience, you don't go back.
Yeah.
You really notice a massive change. It might even be something as simple as your emails are replied to a lot quicker. Then it might be, you have to wait 48 hours for a response, and you change to a different agency and you get it within 24 hours.
Yep.
Or, they let you know when they're going to be closed. Some agencies don't do that either to their tenants or to their owners. So it all varies. There's varying reasons why owners will leave, but mostly it comes down to communication and service.
Yep. I mean, it's your money, right? It's your investment.
That's right.
So you want to actually make sure that
it's in the best
being
hands.
looked after.
Yeah. Yep.
And that you get the most return from it. Great. Well, that ends that sort of topic for me. Thank you so much for having a chat about that. And thank you to everyone for tuning into this episode of Parkstone at Home. I've been Hayley.
I'm Elizabeth.
And if you want to get more and more content from us, you can stream this podcast that we're recording now on YouTube and Spotify. Follow us on all the socials at Parkstone Property, where we'll post little shorts from these recordings and just other updates about various things in Mackay. But otherwise, thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Bye.
See you later.
I wish I knew